What's up, fam? Welcome back to my channel. If you are new, what's up? My name is Natalie and this is my channel, Music to Makeup.
My intuition is telling me there'll be better days. Yeah. My intuition is telling me there'll be better days. Yeah. My intuition is telling me there'll be better days. I sit inside.
So today's video isn't going to be about music or makeup. It's going to be one of the topics in between that I want to start doing more of. But this is a video that I have been wanting to do for a long time. And then I believe that the universe brought this book to my attention for a reason. So if you think you are a woman who loves too much, or if you put people's needs before your own, then I think you will definitely enjoy this video. And if you do, please give it a thumbs up. And don't forget to subscribe to my channel and let me know if you like these types of videos. They're kind of hard because this is the first time I am going to be like verbally saying these things out loud. I've been reading them and feeling them on the inside, but I just want to share my experience with, I guess, being a woman who loves too much and being codependent, and how I became that way, and how I kind of got to a point where something needed to change. Okay, so the book is called Women Who Love Too Much, and it is by Norwood. So I'm going to read the description, and it says, "This is the world-renowned, inspiring, practical program for women who believe that being in love means being in pain. A multi-million copy bestseller, Women Who Love Too Much presents a clear, comprehensive 10-point recovery plan for women who are addicted to the wrong men for the wrong reasons. Among the vital lessons you will learn in this program are how the search for the love you never got from your parents can become a crushing obsession in adulthood, how to change from loving someone so much it hurts to loving yourself enough to stop the pain, how to free yourself from destructive loving and build a healthy, meaningful relationship. This step-by-step self-awareness program offers help, understanding, and above all, hope. The pathway to making love the truly happy event it is supposed to be." Okay. There are basically 3 ways in which these children attempt to save their families: by being invisible, by being bad, or by being good. To be invisible means to never ask for anything, never cause trouble, never make any kind of demand. The child who chooses this role scrupulously avoids adding any burden to her already stressed family. She stays in her room or blends into the wallpaper. She says very little and makes what she does say non-committal. In school, she is neither bad nor good. In fact, she is barely remembered at all. Her contribution to the family is to not exist. As for her own pain, she is numb. She feels nothing. To be bad is to be the rebel, the juvenile delinquent, the one who waves a red flag. This child sacrifices herself, agreeing to be the family's scapegoat, the family's problem. She makes herself the focus for the family's pain, anger, fear, and frustration. Her parents' relationship may be disintegrating, but she provides them with a safe topic they can work on together. They can ask, "What are we going to do about Joni?" instead of, "What are we going to do about our marriage?" This is how she tries to save the family. And she has only one feeling: anger. It covers her pain and her fear. To be good is what Janice was, and what I was. An achiever out in the world whose accomplishments are aimed at redeeming the family and filling the emptiness inside. Appearing happy, bright, and enthusiastic serves to cover the tension, fear, and anger inside. Looking good becomes much more important than feeling good, than feeling anything. When I was in high school, I was like the perfect student. I graduated third in my high school class. I was in all honors and AP classes. I was on the soccer team, the swim team. I was on the math team. I had a bunch of friends, and everything looked great on the outside, but on the inside, I hated myself. I hated myself. I was anorexic in high school, and I would also cut myself. I hated myself so much that I felt I needed to punish myself, and that's what the cutting was. I felt I deserved to suffer. For each of the women in this chapter, recovery demanded that she face the pain, past and present, that she had attempted to avoid. As a child, each had developed a style for surviving that included practicing denial and attempting to gain control. Later in adulthood, those styles ill-served these women. In fact, their defenses had become major contributors to their pain. For the woman who loves too much, the practice of denial, magnanimously rephrased as overlooking his faults or keeping a positive attitude, conveniently sidesteps the chew-to-tango aspect of how his shortcomings allow her to practice her familiar roles. When her drive to control masquerades as being helpful and giving encouragement, what is ignored again is her own need for the superiority and power implied in this kind of interaction. We need to recognize that the practice of denial and control, called by whatever names, does not ultimately enhance our lives or our relationships. Rather, the mechanism of denial leads us into relationships that allow for the compulsive reenactment of our old struggles, and the need to control keeps us there, striving to change someone else rather than ourselves. Now to return to the fairy tale highlighted at the beginning of the chapter, Beauty and the Beast. Would appear to be Okay. So what then is the point of Beauty and the Beast? It is acceptance. Acceptance is the antithesis of denial and control. It is a willingness to recognize what reality is and to allow that reality to be without a need to change it. Therein lies a happiness that issues not from manipulating outside conditions or people, but from developing inner peace, even in the face of challenges and difficulties. Remember, in the fairy tale, Beauty had no need for the Beast to change. She appraised him realistically, accepted him for what he was, and appreciated him for his good qualities. She did not try to make a prince out of a monster. She did not say, "I'll be happy when he's not an animal anymore." She did not pity him for being what he was or try to change him. And therein lies the lesson. Because of her attitude of acceptance, he was freed to become his own best self. That his true self just happened to be a handsome prince demonstrates symbolically that she was rewarded greatly when she practiced acceptance. Her reward was a rich and fulfilling life signified by living happily ever with the prince. True acceptance of an individual as he is, without trying to change him through encouragement or manipulation or coercion, is a very high form of love and very difficult for most of us to practice. At the bottom of all our efforts to change someone else is a basically selfish motive, a belief that through his changing we will become happy. There is nothing wrong with wanting to be happy, but to place the source of that happiness outside ourselves in someone else's hands means we avoid our ability and responsibility to change our own life for the better. Okay, ironically, it is this very practice of acceptance that allows another to change if he chooses to do so. Let's look at how this works. If a woman's partner has a problem with workaholism, for instance, and she pleads and argues with him about the long hours he spends away from home, what is the usual result? He spends just as much or more time away from her, feeling justified that he has a right to do so in order to escape her endless laments. In other words, by scolding and pleading and trying to change him, she actually enables him to believe that the problem between them is not his workaholism, but her nagging. And indeed, her compulsion to change him may become as large a contributing factor to the emotional distance between them as his compulsion to work. In her efforts to force him to be closer to her, she's actually pushing him away. Workaholism is a serious disorder, as are all compulsive behaviors. It serves a purpose in her husband's life, probably protecting him from experiencing the closeness and intimacy he fears, and forestalling the upwelling of various uncomfortable emotions, primarily anxiety and despair. Workaholism is one of the means of avoiding oneself that men from dysfunctional families frequently employ, just as loving too much is one of the primary means of avoidance employed by women from these same types of families. Most of us have the ability to be far happier and more fulfilled as individuals than we realize. Often we don't claim that happiness because we believe someone else's behavior is preventing us from doing so. We ignore our obligation to develop ourselves while we scheme and maneuver and manipulate to change someone else, and we become angry and discouraged and depressed when our efforts fail. Trying to change someone else is frustrating and depressing, but exercising the power we have to affect change in our own life is exhilarating. For the wife of a workaholic to be free to live a fulfilling life of her own, no matter what her husband does, she must come to believe that his problem is not her problem, and that it is not within her power, her duty, or her right to change him. She must learn to respect his right to be who he is, even though she wishes he were different. When she does so, she is free of resentment for his unavailability, free of guilt for not being able to change him, free of the burden of trying to change that which she cannot. With less resentment and guilt, she may begin to feel greater affection for him, for the qualities in him that she does appreciate. When she lets go of trying to change him and redirects her energy to developing her own interests, she will experience some measure of happiness and satisfaction, no matter what he does. She may eventually discover that her pursuits are fulfilling enough so that she can enjoy a rich and rewarding life on her own without much companionship from her husband. Or, as she becomes less and less dependent on him for her happiness, she may decide that her commitment to an absent partner is pointless and may choose to get on with her life free of the constraint of an unrewarding marriage. Neither of these paths is possible as long as she needs him to change in order for her to be happy. Until she accepts him as he is, she is frozen in suspended animation, waiting for him to change before she can begin to live her life. When a woman who loves too much gives up her crusade to change the man in her life, he is then left to ponder the consequences of his own behavior. In order to block our deepest feelings from childhood, some of us have also developed dependencies on addictive substances. In our youth or later in adulthood, we may begin abusing alcohol or other drugs, or most typically for women who love too much food. We have overeaten or undereaten or both in order to tune out reality, distract ourselves, and numb the vast emotional emptiness deep inside us. Because we feel terrible about ourselves, we want a man to make us feel better. Because we can't love ourselves, we need him to convince us that we are lovable. We even tell ourselves that with the right man, we won't need so much food or alcohol or so many drugs. We use relationships in the same way that we use our addictive substances, to take away our pain. When a relationship fails us, we turn even more frantically to the substance we've abused, again looking for relief. A vicious cycle is created when physical dependence on a substance is exacerbated by the stress of an unhealthy relationship, and emotional dependence on a relationship is intensified by the chaotic feelings engendered by physical addiction. Women with eating disorders also very frequently have episodes of compulsive stealing, so that was another clue. I'm here because my attorney sent me. Brenda was nearly whispering as she made this confession on the occasion of our first appointment. I took some things and got caught, and he thought it would be a good idea for me to see someone for counseling. She continued conspiratorially that it would look better when I go back to court if they think I'm getting help with my problems. I barely had time to nod before she rushed on. Except, well, I don't think I really have any problems. I took a couple of things from this little drugstore and forgot to pay for them. That's pretty awful having them think I stole from them, but really it was just an oversight. The worst thing about all this is the embarrassment. But I don't have any real problems, not like some people do. Brenda was presenting one of the most difficult challenges in counseling. A client who is not motivated enough to seek help for herself, indeed who denies needing any help, yet is there in the office referred by someone else who thinks counseling would be beneficial. While she chatted on breathlessly, I found myself tuning out the words rushing at me. Instead, I studied the woman herself. She was tall, at least 5'10", and fashion model thin, weighing at the most 115 pounds. She wore an elegantly simple silk dress of deep coral, accented with heavy ivory and gold jewelry. With her honey blonde hair and sea green eyes, she should have been beautiful. The ingredients were all there, but something was off, something was missing. Her brows were chronically knitted, creating a deep vertical crease between them. She held her breath a lot, nostrils constantly flared, and her hair, though carefully cut and coiffed, was dry and brittle. Her skin was papery and sallow in spite of an attractive tan. Her mouth would have been wide and full, but she constantly pursed her lips together, making them appear thin and tight. When she smiled, it was though she was carefully drawing a curtain back across her teeth, and when she spoke, she did so with much lip biting. I began to suspect that she practiced self-induced vomiting along with binge eating, bulimia, and/or self-starvation, anorexia, because of the quality of her skin and hair, as well as her extreme thinness. Women with eating disorders also very frequently have episodes of compulsive stealing, so that was another clue. I also strongly suggested that she was a co-alcoholic. In my practice, nearly every woman I have seen with an eating disorder has been the daughter of either one alcoholic, two alcoholics, or an alcoholic and a compulsive eater. Compulsive eaters and alcoholics very frequently marry each other, which is not surprising since so many compulsive eaters are daughters of alcoholics. Brenda's real story, which she at first very hesitantly and cautiously disclosed, began to emerge during our third session. She looked very tired and drawn, and when I commented on this, she admitted having had trouble sleeping that week. What had happened to cause that, I queried her. First, she blamed it on the upcoming trial, but that explanation didn't ring entirely true, so I probed. Is there anything else that's troubling you this week? She waited a while, determinedly chewing her lips, working her way systematically from top lip to bottom and back. Then she fairly blurted out, I asked my husband to leave, finally, and now I wish I hadn't. I can't sleep, I can't work, I'm a nervous wreck. I hated what he was doing, running around so obviously with that girl from work, but getting along without him is harder than putting up with all of that. Now I don't know which way to turn, and I wonder if it wasn't all my fault anyway. He always said it was, that I was too cold and distant, not enough of a woman for him. And I guess he was right. I was angry and withdrawn a lot, but it was because he criticized me so much. I kept telling him, if you want me to be warm towards you, then you have to treat me as though you like me and say nice things to me, instead of telling me how awful or dumb or unattractive I am. Then she immediately became frightened, those eyebrows climbing even higher up her forehead, and she began discounting everything she had just disclosed. Waving manicured nails, she disclaimed, we're not really separated, we're just taking time off from each other for a while. And Rudy isn't that critical, really. I guess I deserve it. Sometimes I'm tired when I come home from work and I don't want to cook, especially because he doesn't like what I cook. He likes his mother cooking so much better that he'll leave the table for his mother's house and then not get home again till 2 in the morning. I just don't feel like trying so hard to make him happy when it never works anyway. But it's not that bad. Lots of women have it worse. What does he do until 2? He can't be at his mother's all that time, I questioned. I don't even want to know. I guess he's out with his girlfriend, but I don't care. I like it better when he leaves me alone. Lots of times he wants to fight when he finally does get home, and it was more because of that, making me so tired for work the next day, than his carrying on that finally made me ask him to leave. Here was a woman determined not to feel or reveal her emotions. that they were fairly screaming to make themselves heard only stirred her to create more predicaments in her life in order to drown them out. And that was something that I was engaged to someone, and he lost his job, as that tends to be a common theme in my relationship history. My ex-husband, who I met at 17 and he was 22, I guess that didn't set off any alarms for me that he was dating someone who was underage, and he had a 4-year-old child. But I was just so excited that someone was actually interested in me, and we actually worked together at a restaurant. Then he lost his job, so I conveniently asked him to move in with me. And I was barely 18. And he just could never keep a job. But somehow I managed to go to nursing school and support both of us. But I would always make excuses for him, and he would always have a good reason, or say he was looking for a job and couldn't find one. And he was in and out of prison, and I would bail him out every single time. And I just wanted to be married so badly, and he wasn't even the one to propose to me. I'm actually the one that brought it up. And then we were at the mall one day, and I said, oh, let's go into the jewelry store. And I saw a ring I liked, and I bought it myself. And then I paid for the wedding. He was just on a free ride the entire time. And I thought that he loved me, so I was willing to sacrifice everything. But he wasn't willing to sacrifice anything. As indicated in each story presented in this book, women who love too much come from families of origin in which they were either very lonely and isolated, or rejected, or overburdened with inappropriately heavy responsibilities, and so became overly nurturing and self-sacrificing. Or else they were subjected to dangerous chaos so that they developed an overwhelming need to control the people around them and the situations in which they found themselves. It naturally follows that a woman who needs to nurture, control, or both will be able to do so only with a partner who at least allows, if not actually invites, this kind of behavior. Inevitably, she will involve herself with a man who is irresponsible in at least some important areas of his life because he clearly needs her help, her nurturing, and her control. Then begins her struggle to try to change him through the power and persuasion of her love. It is at this early point that the later insanity of the relationship is foreshadowed as she begins to deny the reality of the relationship. Remember, denial is an unconscious process occurring automatically and unbidden. Her dream of how it could be and her efforts to achieve that end distort her perception of how it is. Every disappointment, failure, and betrayal in the relationship is either ignored or rationalized away. It's not that bad. You don't understand what he's really like. He didn't mean to. It's not his fault. These are just a few of the stock phrases that the woman who loves too much uses at this point in her disease process to defend her partner in her relationship. At the same time that this man is disappointing her and failing her, she is becoming more dependent on him emotionally. This is because she has already become tightly focused on him, his problems, his welfare, and perhaps more important, his feelings for her. As she continues to try to change him, he absorbs most of her energy. He soon becomes the source of all good things in her life. If being with him doesn't feel good, she tries to fix him or herself so that it does. She does not look elsewhere for emotional gratification. She is too busy trying to make it work between them. She is sure that if she can make him happy, he will treat her better, and then she will be happy too. In her efforts to please, she becomes the careful guardian of his well-being. Each time he is upset, she takes his reaction as her failure and feels guilty for his unhappiness that she hasn't been able to ameliorate, for his inadequacies that she hasn't been able to rectify. But perhaps most of all, she feels guilty for being unhappy herself. Her denial tells her that there is nothing really wrong with him, so the fault must be all hers. In her despair, which she judges as founded on trivial problems and petty complaints, she begins to need very badly to talk things over with her partner. Long discussions ensue, if he will talk with her, but the real problems are not usually addressed. If he is drinking too much, her denial prevents her from recognizing this, and she pleads with him to tell her why he's so unhappy. Assuming his drinking is not important, but his unhappiness certainly is. If he is being unfaithful, she asks why she isn't enough of a woman for him, accepting the situation as her fault, not his, and so on. Things are getting worse, but because her partner fears that she may become discouraged and pull away from him, and he needs her support, emotional, financial, social, or practical, he tells her she's wrong, that she's imagining things, that he loves her, and that their situation is improving. And she believes him because she needs to so much. She accepts his view that she is exaggerating their problems and becomes further removed from reality. He has become her barometer, her radar, her emotional gauge, and she watches him constantly. All her feelings are generated by his behavior. At the same time that she gives him the power to rock and sway her emotionally, she runs interference between him and the world. She tries to make him look better than he is and to make them as a couple appear happier than they are. She rationalizes away his every failure, her every disappointment, and while she hides the truth from the world, she also hides it from herself. Unable to accept that he is what he is and that his problems are his, not hers, she experiences a profound sense of having failed in all her energetic attempts to change him. Her frustrations erupt in anger, and there are battles, sometimes physical ones, initiated by her in her rage at what appears to be his deliberate thwarting of her best efforts on his behalf. Just as she once excused his every failing, she now takes everything personally. She feels that she is the only one trying to make the relationship work. Her guilt grows as she wonders where this rage in her is coming from and why she cannot be lovable enough for him to want to change for them. Even more determined to bring about the changes in him that she seeks, she is now willing to try anything. They exchange promises. She won't nag him if he won't drink or stay out late or run around or whatever. Neither of them is able to stick to the bargain, and she perceives dimly that she is out of control, not only of him, but of herself as well. She cannot stop fighting, scolding, weeding, begging. Her self-respect plummets. Perhaps they move away, thinking that friends, jobs, family are to blame for their problems. And perhaps things are better for a while afterward, but only for a while. Too soon, all the old patterns reassert themselves. By now, she is so consumed with this bitter battle that there is no time or energy for anything else. If there are children, they are certainly emotionally neglected, if not neglected physically as well. Social activities come to a standstill. There is too much acrimony and too many secrets to keep to make public appearances anything but ordeal. And the lack of social contact serves to isolate the woman who loves too much even further. She has lost another vital link with reality. Her relationship has become her entire world. Once upon a time, this man's irresponsibility and neediness appealed to her. That was when she was sure she could change him, fix him. Now she finds herself shouldering burdens that are rightfully his to carry. And while she deeply resents him for this turn of events, she also revels in the sense of control it gives her over him as she parcels out his money and takes over total control of their children. She has become bitterly envious of people who don't have her problems, and more she finds herself increasingly taking her frustrations out on all those around her through increasingly violent attacks on her partner and often her children as well. At this point, as the ultimate attempt to control her partner through guilt, she may threaten or actually attempt suicide. Needless to say, by now, she and everyone around her is very, very sick, certainly emotionally and often physically as well. It is instructive to consider, too, for a moment, how a child whose mother suffers from the disease of loving too much would be affected. Many of the women in the stories you have read here grew up under those conditions. When the woman who has begun by loving too much finally realizes that she has tried everything to change her man and that her best efforts has failed, perhaps she is able to see that she must get help. Usually the help she seeks involves turning to someone else, perhaps a professional, in one more attempt to change her man. It is crucial that the person to whom she turns help her recognize that she is the one who must change, that her recovery must begin with herself. But for those of you who are wise enough, wary enough, or desperate enough to want to get well more than you want to either fix the man you are with or find a new one, for those of you who really do want to change yourself, the steps of recovery follow.